Okay, so yeah, we're recording again. Yeah, sorry, we had a little bit of some signal drop out, but you were talking about
Hmm.
asking questions on Quora, like neutral questions about the Korean War, and you were talking
Right.
about,
It would be like a neutral
Chinese
question
tanks.
about like what kind of armor was effective and not effective, and like someone would respond that like the Chinese tanks were not very effective or something like that, and there'd be like 100 comments about like how dare you people criticize the Chinese people? The Chinese people have been humiliated, but we'll rise up. And I was like, why are you guys having such a strong reaction to this? We're like discussing armor. Um, but so yeah, that's called like the glass hearts and stuff, and uh, it's a thing. It's like a phenomenon, and
Yeah,
I don't want to be too critical, but one sort of more neutral example of that was when I first went to China. I collected stamps, and so I asked this girl. I was like, "Hey, are there any like stamp stores here, or, like old stamps, or do you guys have that kind of thing?" And she was like, "No, no, just stamps. We don't have stamps. And China is like a modern and like advanced country. We don't have old stamps anymore." And so she got a little bit defensive even about that. And I was like, "Oh, okay." I was like, "You don't have stamps?" She said, "No, no, we're not some third world country." I was like, "Yeah, yeah." And I was like,
right.
"What
And,
about
and
mail? How do you get mail?" And she's like, "No, we have like our phones and stuff." Yeah.
it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of, in my mind, I'm thinking like the examples you're giving. This I also think is like the difference between face culture in China versus America. Because in America, of course, people care about image and reputation. So some
Uh-huh.
people might say, "Oh, we have face in America," and it's like we kind of
Uh-huh.
do, but not to the extent. It's not as vital as in China because I feel like, and you and I, we've talked about this before. I think. China, whereas China's hypersensitive, America's sort of the opposite, hyper self-critical,
Yeah, I
and
totally agree with that.
you agree with that. Everyone's
Mm-hmm.
agreed with that so far, so it's not just me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there might be a lot of factors at play, but I feel like again one of them is just this emphasis on face that
Mm-hmm.
Chinese people and the government and everything they just want to have this shiny, nice image,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so important that
Mm-hmm.
truth is secondary, and sometimes they get a
Mm-hmm.
bit Orwellian because they care so much about face and
Mm-hmm.
image and how they think they're perceived. Whereas in
Yeah,
America,
a little
we
more
love
relaxed.
to air our dirty laundry. We love to repent constantly for things that
Uh-huh.
happened in the past. Rather than sweep it under
Mm-hmm.
the rug, we put it on display for the world to see and bang drums about it so everyone knows. And again, I think because I feel like too. It's almost maybe I'm going off a bit here, but I think I've read that Eastern countries like China and Japan are like shame cultures, and America's more like a
Mm-hmm.
guilt culture because of Judeo Christianity
Yeah, that's
versus Confucianism.
uh-huh.
So there's a lot of factors, but I definitely think in China people always want to save face for themselves, their
Mm-hmm.
families, their nation. So yeah, no criticism, nothing.
Uh-huh.
And then America, the total opposite, because we just
Uh-huh.
don't have that concept of face. I think we care more
Yeah,
about
I think we're
truth.
a little bit more
Go ahead.
self-secure, like if somebody said that we had terrible tanks in World War II, we'd say, yeah, we had pretty bad tanks in World War II, but we still won World War II, and we kind of see ourselves, even though we're often very critical of ourselves, um, we're sort of more at ease and confident about ourselves. And maybe in China, that's not the case. They always feel like they're gonna be criticized or something like that, or maybe they're not as self-secure or something like that. But yeah, you're right. Definitely, people like Americans will like make a joke about how fat Americans are at Walmart or whatever like that. But in China, no one would ever make a joke about how fat Chinese people are at Walmart or anything like that.
Right, right. Or maybe their lack of hygiene in some instances.
Yeah, that was dragon breath. Yeah,
Right,
that
right.
would not be
That I think
maybe.
that was one of my first sort of culture shocks when I arrived was just the lower hygiene standards, because Yes, a lot of people, they don't bathe as often as we do. A lot of people don't
Well,
wear
they bathe
deodorant.
in the night instead of the morning. Yeah, it's just a different. They'll like take a shower before going to bed all the time, whereas Americans don't typically do that, but they do shower when they first wake up,
I
whereas
think
Chinese don't necessarily.
I think in some cases that's true, but I've also known lots of students or teacher ask students, "When did you last take a shower?" And they'd be like, "Oh, a week ago," or because sometimes,
Really? No,
because
I think people I work
yeah,
around better than
because
that.
because sometimes they're at boarding schools and they have like limited hours to take a shower, or they have limited access, so
Oh
it's a
my
little bit
god.
more complex. But yeah, whatever the reason is, I do think in general the hygiene standards are lower in China than most places I've been. I mean, you go to
Uh-huh.
Japan or Thailand or the
Uh-huh.
Philippines
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you go to a public restroom in most countries and they're going to have soap and toilet paper, and so
Uh-huh.
many Chinese bathrooms
They
lack
don't toilet paper.
lack those. And that's
Yeah,
one thing I would
definitely
recommend
not.
to teachers,
Yeah,
people going
carry
to
some
China.
paper in your pocket because none's gonna be provided for you.
Yeah, carry some paper if you go out, and some hand sanitizer. Now, if you're going to a nice mall or something like, and it has a Starbucks, usually a Starbucks or a McDonald's would have those things, but not always. It's always good to be prepared, because I have been in situations before, I think, where uh,
You
it
found
was
out
an emergent,
even
yeah, like where I
McDonald's.
just, yeah. I think one time I had an emergency and I didn't have any tissue, so I had to use money.
Yeah,
I had some one
that
yuan notes, so that's what I used for toilet paper.
yeah, that happens sometimes.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh, yeah. Go
but
ahead.
yeah, but see how we're talking like this? If you brought that up in China, could you imagine? You know how that would go. They'd be, no, no, Chinese people are very civilized. That never happens.
Right. And I
Yeah,
think that's one reason sometimes why they sort of don't seem to innovate or get ahead, is because they care so
yeah, they're
much.
so perfect already.
Say again?
They're so perfect already. They don't need to innovate.
How do you make a perfect thing more
They have
perfect? Right.
5,000
Whereas,
years of history.
right, but we weren't the first to go to the moon.
They
But
on the
in
moon with
America,
the morning.
again, I think we're so much more self-critical, and again, I think we get a little carried away with it. But I think that being able to criticize yourself and not worry too much about face, and be able to just keep trying until you succeed. I
Yeah,
think these are part of why America in the modern age has been successful, because of
yeah,
just
completely
you know
agree. That, well, like for example, a general in the U.S. might be touting his battleship or something, but it'd be common for any American to be like, "No, that battleship sucks," and the Russians could just punch right through it or whatever. Whereas any general in China says his battleship is great. 100% of people agree that it's the best battleship that's ever been built.
right,
And nobody's going to be criticizing a Chinese battleship in China. But as a
right,
result, they might actually lose a war because nobody's willing to criticize it. Whereas Americans will keep improving and improving and improving because it's always being criticized.
right, and
Yeah,
we can criticize our leaders, we can criticize ourselves, we can criticize our government,
yeah,
and
I think that's great. It gets annoying sometimes, but it's actually been a great benefit in a lot of ways. Because
right,
it allows us to criticize, and there's more sense, a little bit more egalitarian. Like people could criticize, um, like a CEO or a president or a general or whatever. Whereas in China, that would not really happen unless the general like lost face already. Then it might be okay.
right. Now, we're getting towards the end, so
Mm-hmm.
we kind of went into this a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
just again, I'll ask if there's anything else you want to add to this. What advice would you give to someone going to China to teach for the first time? Someone's going to go to China to teach. It's their first time. What would you say they should know? How could they prepare? What advice might you give?
Well, the best advice, and I wish that I had this advice myself, and it's mostly that China is just very, very different, and it's not necessarily better or worse. It's just you have to understand that it's really different, and it's not going to
Right.
change and like conform to what you might like. Like I remember, especially towards the end, and it's kind of sad for me that I had to go through it. But like, it was sort of when the political thing was happening with like South Korea's THAAD and their missile defense radar or whatever, and like the people were like really, really angry about like the U.S. like intervening in Chinese affairs and stuff, and so I felt like this overwhelming like sense of like hostility towards me and towards foreigners, and then I got like really defensive and like I was just unhappy, or like I'd be sitting at like a restaurant and people would just be staring at me, and I'd just be like, "What are you staring at?" And just drove me crazy. Or like people would like, I'd be like eating at a restaurant and people would just start smoking a cigarette like right next to me.
Yeah.
And like even in like other countries I had been to, there were different cultures from America. They'd still smoke a cigarette in the restaurant, but they'd ask like, "Do you mind if I smoke a cigarette?" In Colombia and stuff, but in China they would just like light up the cigarette, and it would like drive me crazy. And I would just say that if you're gonna go to China, you have to just realize that it's gonna be really different like that, and it's not necessarily even worse or better, but it is different. And if you criticize it, you're not gonna be any happier. You're gonna be much less happy.
Yeah,
So,
I agree with that. Yeah.
So
And I would say, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just go along with it. Don't criticize. Yeah, don't criticize. It's not going to help. It's just going to put people on the defensive, and it's going to make you less popular. So people do things that make you upset, and people will do things that make you upset. You don't have to like it, but you're better off just remaining silent and complimenting when you can, you know. And even if someone is staring at you or pointing at you in a restaurant, maybe that's not the most pleasant thing for you. But if you don't take yourself as seriously and just sort of laugh along with it and go, okay, how am I supposed to eat this? And sort of play along with it and realize their intentions aren't necessarily bad. If I had done that, I would have been a lot happier. And at certain times I would go along with it, you know. Like I actually visited like the Confucian Institute and stuff, and this is another really big difference between America and the U.S. If you go to like a national site in America, like Yosemite, you're gonna see like Germans and Israelis and just, Americans, Japanese, all sorts of different people. But when you go to a national site in China, it's like all Chinese people. It was like packed, but only Chinese. I was the only white person. I was the only non-Chinese person, really. And so like, people were like taking pictures of me and like pointing at me and stuff like that. And in that case, I actually went along with it. I was just like, "Hey, how's it going?" And like, I just let them take a picture of me.
Yeah.
And whereas some people might have gotten upset with that, or I've even heard of like foreigners like taking pictures back and stuff, and that kind of thing might be tempting, but actually when I went along with it and just sort of laughed and let them take my pictures and said hi and stuff like that, I was so much more happy. So yeah, I would just avoid being critical or getting frustrated.
Yeah. Don't be publicly critical. Like you can privately,
For a close friend, you could say, "God, I get a little bit annoyed when people take my picture." And I'll say, "Oh, don't worry about it. It's just that they're interested in you because they've never seen anyone like you before."
Sure. I do think it is usually just curiosity, but there's been many times over the years in China where I felt like I kind of emphasized with celebrities who go off on paparazzi. I remember when I was younger, you'd see footage of a celebrity like punching a photographer, and I'd be like, "Oh, that celebrity's a jerk. I'm never gonna watch his." But then after being in China and having that sometimes constantly in my face, I started to go, and some days it would just it would just irritate me. And I'd be like, okay, I understand sometimes why celebrities get irritated with this because they're just trying to go for a walk and they've got people bouncing around them, and it's just like, leave me alone.
For a walk.
Yeah.
If that kind of thing would bother you a lot, then maybe you shouldn't go to China. But
Yeah,
if you are in China, I'm not even trying to say this like condescendingly towards anyone, but just to help them out, that I would just say it is very different. And if you just criticize it and are unhappy, you're just going to make yourself more unhappy.
sure.
And the best thing to do is to just not take yourself as seriously and just go along with it. And if you need to confine with like a close friend in private later, but don't be like, don't take my picture. It's not
Right.
anything.
Yeah, sometimes you just have to grin and bear it.
There's a lot of
And
different and
go
things
ahead.
like I remember there would be like spit in restaurants, like people like indoors would like spit and you like put your backpack down and it'd be like spit and you're like, God, what is wrong with these people? But if you complain, then it doesn't make it any better. So just you learn to put your backpack on a chair or whatever.
Got to adapt. Yeah, they do
Yeah.
spit a lot, and that's one thing. A lot of people going to China their first time, whether they're Filipino or American or British or whatever, will comment on the spitting, the
Yeah.
constant loud spitting.
Yeah. And I would
That's
say don't bring that up with any Chinese people because it will not go over well. But but just be careful about where you put your backpack down.
yeah, yeah, and watch where you're stepping sometimes. Watch where you're walking. One other
The last
thing I
thing
want.
let me can I
Okay.
add one thing that
Yeah, yeah.
even though it was easy to get sort of annoyed by the different cultures in China and like people pointing or taking your picture and spitting and stuff, I found that overall they had an almost like juvenile, kind-hearted, warm-hearted sense. It sort of initially it might be a little like irritating when they're pointing and stuff, but really they had like a good heart, and I I never really had like sort of a mean sense from anyone, and so even though like the pointing and stuff could get a little annoying, once I actually like played along and was curious or asked a question about their culture, I found them to be sort of warm-hearted and like curious and like maybe I'm not really expressing myself as well because I'm a little tired, but things like taking a picture, it's not necessarily offensive. They're not trying to like stick it to a foreigner. They're just genuinely curious, and
Sure.
once you get to know them more, you'll see like a more warm-hearted culture, and you'll see that in a like personal relations. And so there's actually a lot to discover if you're willing to like have your picture taken with Chinese people and stuff like that. And that was kind of like a warm, positive aspect to it.
Sure, sure. Now, one
Mm-hmm.
thing you said earlier, I want to react to is you said, China is very different from America, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily better or worse. It's just different, and I think that's pretty good. That's kind of how I feel about it,
Mm-hmm.
because when I compare the two, or when I think about life in China, I think in some ways it's better and it's more comfortable, and I think that's why
Mm-hmm.
I've worked there so many years. In other ways, it's less convenient than America. For example,
Mm-hmm.
it's obnoxious to me sometimes that I have to use a VPN to access the internet.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, sometimes the bathrooms aren't up to standards I prefer. So
Yeah.
there are some cons, but generally I always feel like in China, in spite of the disadvantages of the cons, generally I feel like the pros outweigh the cons. And when I've gone back to
Mm-hmm.
America,
Mm-hmm.
usually the first few weeks I'm doing all the things I miss, I enjoy. But then after a while, I start to miss certain things from China, and I start going, oh, I
Yeah.
kind of miss this and that. But anyway, so I guess for my last question, I have something written, but I'm actually changing it. I just want to ask you, and again, maybe we've touched on this already a bit, but
Mm-hmm.
but to conclude, what, in your opinion, would you say are maybe some of the pros of living and teaching in China, and what would you say are some of the cons?
Well, it's a big question, but there are a number of pros. One of the pros was I got a large apartment for myself for a good price, for a cheap price, whereas that definitely would not be the case in Central Coast, California.
Right.
So yeah, I had this beautiful apartment that I liked, and it was actually pretty quiet and peaceful. Even the like shower was like a high flow, warm shower and stuff like that. And so that was pretty nice. And I felt like I was paid pretty well. I was able to save up my money. There wasn't a lot of money, a lot to spend money on actually.
Mm.
But I guess that's one other little tip I could give people is you can actually buy a more comfortable mattress. I went a year without sleeping on this sort of like,
Oh
um,
yeah. That's
you know,
something we should
the
maybe point
hard sort
out.
of
Yeah.
hardboard like
They
beds.
like hard furniture and
Yeah,
hard mattresses.
yeah.
Yes.
I slept on that for a year,
Yeah, that
and
hasn't come up in any of my conversations yet. I'm glad you brought that up because that's been one of my, issues or a lot of people is you get to the apartment they provide, which is great, but then the couch and the bed, it's like a rock and you're like, where's the
yeah,
mattress? And they're like, that is the mattress.
yeah. Where's the mattress? Yeah, that happened, and I just sort of like subconsciously or something just went along with it. I was like, God, these beds suck, and I'm trying. But I slept on that for a year, like I say, and then they're like, you want? That's part of the other thing. My school was like, oh, are you cold or anything? Can we get you anything? I was like, yeah, can we could I have some more blankets because I'm quite cold, and they actually did provide some blankets and stuff. But then I slept on the bed, and then after like a year, I was like, God, the bed's kind of uncomfortable. Is there any way to buy like a mattress or something? Oh yeah, no problem. We could just order it online. And like the next day, I like bought like a perfectly nice, comfortable
Yeah,
mattress for not very much
yeah.
money. God, I wish I did this a year ago.
That's definitely something I would advise people to do day one is first see if your school, maybe bring that up with the school because they usually provide, bring up the mattress, and then if they can't or aren't willing to
Yeah,
or
it wasn't.
whatever, go ahead.
It was delivered to my door.
Okay. Because
Yeah.
one of the things I did when I went to a university in Beijing, I got to the apartment. It was a nice apartment, nice TV, nice bathroom, fully furnished,
Uh-huh.
refrigerator, everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, the quote unquote mattress is like a piece of cardboard, and I slept on it for maybe a few weeks, and it was literally just killing my back. So I was in Beijing, and my one of my friends' coworkers had the same
Uh-huh.
issue. We were in the same
Yeah.
complex. So one of the first things we did was we went to IKEA, and
Oh
with
yeah, I
I think
remember.
our first paycheck we got like deluxe, really really nice mattresses, and I
Oh yeah.
still have mine in Zibbo. I actually had it transported, so I've had my mattress a couple of years. I would say, yeah, if you're going to be in China for a
Uh-huh.
year or longer, it is well worth investing in a nice mattress. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, that and they also have some convenient apps and stuff. However, about it wasn't a year, but maybe about 6 months in, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you could have food delivered to your door and stuff." And it was really convenient. There's
Yeah,
apps. Um, someone showed me how, and then yeah, they would just deliver good meals, and you could select them just by like clicking on the picture, and they actually deliver it to your door pretty fast. That's something if someone's in go to China and just ask your friends about that, and you could actually have like pretty good food delivered to your door, and it's kind of cool.
yeah, and even like McDonald's does delivery. I don't think we have McDonald's delivery in the States.
No, or KFC that you could like order it ahead of time and then like go there and pick it up. That was convenient.
Yeah, and it's the
Yeah,
same
it's
here in
cool.
the Philippines. They have McDonald's delivery and KFC delivery, and in America we have pizza delivery. I think there's some apps like Food Panda or something. I think it's becoming more common, but I find like in
Uh-huh.
Asian countries, almost everywhere seems to deliver.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So okay, those are some of the anything else in terms of pros and cons you think are worth mentioning?
Um, I can't think of too much. I guess one other little pro tip, I guess I could say, is like giving gifts goes over very well, and that's something that sort of came naturally to me. But I guess maybe some people want to like keep money to themselves or something. But
Mm.
um, I was always like given like the guards of my apartment complex like packs of cigarettes and stuff.
Right.
And I'd go over. I won't do it all the time, but maybe like once a month, I'd give them like a pack of cigarettes, and that went over extremely well. Or like if you're going to any, like if anyone ever invites you to their house, that's a big compliment, by the way, if that ever happens.
Yeah.
But always a good idea to bring a gift or two. You'll never go wrong. I remember, I don't know. And a more pro tip is to bring two gifts, because there's a thing about Chinese culture that one is kind of lonely and sad. So if you bring like two bottles of wine, it's always better than bringing one bottle of wine or something.
Huh.
So yeah, it went over well. I'd bring little gifts and it would go over well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool. Anything else? I think that we've covered everything I really want to cover. But is there anything you might want to just throw in?
Just have a positive attitude. Like I say, you'll never go wrong by complimenting the Chinese when you're there. So just things you don't like, stay silent. Things you do like, compliment them a lot, and go have a good trip.
If you don't have anything good to say, don't say it.
That's right.
All right.
Right.
Yeah, cool. I think we could stop here. Thank you for participating. Let me stop the recording.